All right, so if you're not familiar with the DuPage County Prevention Leadership Team, we are a county-wide community coalition that works together to prevent substance use and increase mental wellness for DuPage County youth 18 years and younger. Our main focus is environmental level change, and that includes policy level change. So we love working with law enforcement. We have a lot of strong partners in the law enforcement sector. We've worked together on things like social host ordinances, the tobacco 21 laws, and now we have a focus on marijuana prevention and how to protect our youth now that we are in a legalized recreational state. We are happy to partner with law enforcement and communities on community events, health fairs, family nights. We have a lending library of a lot of materials that you're able to check out and borrow from us. We have drunk simulation goggles. If you're in the schools or you have a community event, we have marijuana simulation goggles. Anything else that you might be in need of, you can feel free to contact me. We do have grant money and we're happy to purchase things if it falls underneath the umbrella of our work. Last summer, we did provide some drugged driving banners to almost 20 police departments throughout DuPage for them to display outside of their buildings to spread the message of drugged driving is impaired driving. So you can follow us on Facebook, on other social media platforms. Our website is dupageplt.org for more information. We do have monthly coalition meetings right now via Zoom. You can contact me for more information if you're interested in partnering or working on an event or attending a meeting. I know we have some people on the call today that are already part of the coalition, so we're happy to have you, and welcome to everybody else. So now I'm going to turn it over to our trainer, Acting Lieutenant John Yard. So John, if you want to go ahead and pull up your screen, you can do that now while I'm introducing you. Acting Lieutenant Yard joined Illinois State Police in 1996. He has 19 years of experience in investigating violent crimes throughout the state of Illinois. In 2018, Yard assumed command of the ISP's medical marijuana unit, and in late 2019, the medical marijuana unit under the new Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act expanded into the Cannabis Control Office. Yard is in command of the new Cannabis Control Office for Illinois State Police. So I'm going to go over and hand it to you. John, if you're having trouble, let me know. Looks like your screen is coming up. All right.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Greetings, everyone. Good morning. Looking at the list, I recognize a few of you. So I'm going to try to monitor the chat if anybody has questions, but you can also speak out if you have any questions, and I will try to answer them as I go along, and wish me the best of luck. So we're going to go ahead and start about, this is going to be about cannabis compliance, law enforcement, and the community. Notice the availability date on this is as of today. So all of these items, I know that they're recording, but I'm going to have some documents that you're going to be seeing also, and you can have those. You just need to contact me, and I can make it available to you along with this presentation as a PDF. The reason this is dated 3/21 is because myself and Sergeant Siders just got done with it today. So hopefully everything is up to date. There's a little bit about me. She already told me, so told me about you, or you about me. So I'll go ahead and skip past that. Given that this is law enforcement, I'm going to breeze through some of these items, especially like the history of cannabis. So basically, cannabis has been around for millennia. Dates way back. It originally started probably as a food source and medicinal purposes back in Asia. It also has other purposes. We've used it a lot for hemp through the years, and it was so easy to grow and everything and cultivate that it spread throughout the world. Even in the early 1600s, English colonies were required to grow hemp, mainly for rope and sails and stuff. In about the 1830s, leave it to an Irish guy who decided to do some studying on it and found that some cannabis extracts could possibly help lessen stomach pain and vomiting. And then in the late 1800s, the cannabis extracts started flooding the market in Europe and the United States. They were designed to treat stomach problems and other ailments, probably snake oil and all that. Then cannabis in the U.S. So actually, Illinois made cannabis illegal in 1931, which was 6 years before it became illegal federally. And then in 1978, the Illinois Cannabis Control Act actually allowed legalized medical cannabis, though this was never actioned until years later. Currently, and this is one of the things I just updated, we have 15 states that have legalized adult use cannabis, and then Virginia has got it all the way up to the governor's desk, and he stated that he will sign, so that'll make 16. There are about 34 states that have medical cannabis. The reason I say about 34 is because there's 4 of them that are in the process of passing it right now, so that could take it up to 38, and I don't know the exact process, part of the process that they're in. There's only 6 states in the U.S. where cannabis remains fully illegal. For cannabis in Illinois, started with the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Act in 2013. We were the 20th state to pass medical cannabis. We're also going to talk about the federal farm bill because hemp is cannabis also, so we're going to get into a little bit of that. But the federal farm bill of 2014 authorized states to allow hemp grows and everything. In 2015, Illinois passed the pilot program for hemp, allowing it for research and education. And then in 2015, medical sales started. And in 2018, the Illinois Industrial Hemp Act became into effect. And that allowed for wide-scale farming and processing throughout the state. You guys will find that through the growing months of the year, that you'll be getting calls about cannabis farms and stuff like that. And it could be a legal hemp place because the 2 items look exactly the same. The Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, or the CRTA, which legalized adult recreational use cannabis, occurred in 2019. We were the 11th state to pass adult use cannabis. Adult rec sales began January of last year. And some other things. In 2016, they decriminalized small possession amounts of cannabis, and they also set DUI standards at 5 nanograms for blood and 10 nanograms for other bodily fluids. The CRTA also provides expungements of low-level cannabis convictions. So just real quick, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the cannabis plant, but we're just going to go through it real quick. So the whole plant itself contains over 120 compounds, all that have different properties. The main components that you encounter are cannabinoids and terpenes. Of the cannabinoids, the most common cannabinoids are THC and cannabidiol. You see CBD, which is cannabidiol, is popping up all over the place. It's on every street corner almost now. The most common types of THC are THC delta 9, which is the primary psychoactive ingredient, it's the thing that gets you high. And then you've got THCA. The interesting thing about THCA is it actually makes up the majority of the THC found in the cannabis plant. THCA will convert to THC delta 9 when heated or extracted. If THCA is not activated through heat or extraction, it does not have the psychoactive effects. So if it's ingested without it being heated, it has been found to have possible medicinal properties such as anti-inflammation, anti-nausea, pain relief, and stuff like that. CBDs fall into 2 different categories also. There's CBD isolate and then CBD acid. CBD acid or CBDA would be similar to THCA. It provides the majority of the CBD found in the plant, and then CBDA converts to isolate when heated or extracted. CBD, as I said, it's very popular these days, and you're finding it everywhere, but its purported health benefits include anti-inflammatory, anti-spasmodic, and anti-anxiety. CBD is not supposed to have an intoxicating effect, and pure CBD isolate will affect your body while your mind remains clear, is what they say. Here's just a quick look at the cannabis plants, the different parts of it. Getting into the cannabis plant, we're going to define the two between hemp and marijuana. So they're both cannabis sativa. For the sake of the conversation and discussion here, we're just going to refer to hemp and marijuana as opposed to just cannabis, so that we keep them a little bit separate. So the problem is being able to tell what's what. So if you look at the plants are exactly the same. If you look at the joints or the pre-rolls that you can purchase of the items, they look exactly the same. The actual buds of them look exactly the same because they're all cannabis sativa. The difference between the two is that one contains 0.3% THC or less, which is hemp, and then marijuana contains above 0.3% THC. That being said, when I say 0.3% THC, Illinois, as many of you guys can imagine, likes to do things a little bit different. So Illinois actually defined their THC content differently than the national standard. The national standard is total THC, so that would be Delta 9, Delta 8, and THCA, and any other THCs that you can find out there. Whereas the state of Illinois defined it as only THC9 or Delta 9 THC. So you can have a hemp product that is grown in Illinois that is totally legal that would have less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC, but could have 20% of THCA, which, as we previously discussed, if that's a bud or something like that, if they smoke that, then that's going to convert the THCA to Delta 9. That being said, Illinois is set or scheduled to mirror the national standards in 2021. We're not sure when it's going to happen. They were supposed to do it last year, but they got delayed. So eventually, we hope that Illinois will actually come in to the national standards, because THCA can convert to Delta 9 and get you high. So back to the differences between the two. They look exactly the same, the plant and bud. Both can be smoked. They smell the same when smoked or raw. The thing is one of them is totally legal. I could drive down the street smoking a CBD joint, and it's perfectly legal. That doesn't mean I'm not going to get stopped. That doesn't mean I might not get arrested or something like that. But that's where we're having problems in courts and stuff like that, is because we have to start showing that the item is actually CBD or marijuana. So once again, CBD is totally legal. So how do you tell the difference between the two? The only way that you can tell the difference is by having lab testing performed on it. Right now, the state police's lab does not. They're in the process of setting up quantification testing. We believe that it should be done, at least for THC levels, in the spring of this year, but they've gotten a little bit delayed. I know that DuPage County has a lab that was looking at setting up testing. I don't know where they are at with that process. There are a variety of field test kits out there. We have purchased this mobile detect field kit. I would encourage people to look into it. No, I don't get a kickback from it, but it is actually pretty easy to use, and it actually works with your smartphone, or it can work by itself, but it will generate a report. It'll generate whether it detects, if it listed as THC above 0.3% or less. So it could help you in determining the difference between, is that vape pen a CBD vape pen, or is it a marijuana vape pen? Or it can also help in trafficking of illegal marijuana through the state. Now, keep in mind, if the hemp was produced in the state of Illinois, it technically could have a higher THC level, so it could test hot by this kit, because this is a total THC. Whereas if it's coming from a different state, I believe all other states require that it's total THC of 0.3%. So If somebody says that they're coming from a different state and that it's a hemp or CBD product and you test it and it tests hot with this kit, then that would be presumptive that it is marijuana or illegal trafficking. Illinois State Police Cannabis Control Office. We are comprised of myself, which only an acting lieutenant. We've got a master sergeant. We've got 2 sergeants. One of the sergeant spots is vacant. And then we've got, I'll say 18 inspectors. We just had 1 retired, but we're in the process of hiring 6. So that'll bring us up to 17 inspectors. The different state players for this program, you got the Illinois Department of Agriculture, the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulations, the State Police, Department of Revenue, and Public Health. There's also a few other players, especially after the CRTA got passed, that are involved in it, IDCEOA and DCEO, whatever it is, and stuff. Agriculture handles all of the grow side of the program. So there are currently 21 cultivation centers throughout the state. There are 40 craft grows that are planned. I say planned. They were supposed to be awarded licenses last year that they ran into some licensing problem for the whole program for dispensaries and grow centers. So there's 40 of them that are planned, and then there are 40 infusers that are planned. So a craft grow is going to basically be, think of it more, they're trying to sell it as more of a micro brewery type thing. So they're going to be a smaller scale, but pretty much the availability that you can have for this is, any of your abandoned warehouses or Walmarts or Kmarts or something like that would have the square footage that you could make your own craft grow. There's one of the things happening down here in Springfield, and I believe there's one in Southern Illinois that they're looking at. They're looking at converting some of the abandoned theater centers, where there's one here in Springfield that's got 8 theaters in it that is being converted into a dispensary and using a couple of the theaters, and then they are probably going to apply for a craft grow to use the other side of the theater. So then there's also 40 infusers that are planned. Once again, that's gotten delayed. There are going to be 8 community college grants awarded for this, where they are teaching the all things cannabis and how to grow and care for it. So they're going to be having the ability to have cannabis plants at 8 community colleges. And then something else that is new is there's transportation entities. Right now, all of the cultivation centers handle their transportation to and from the dispensaries, but they've made a new class of license. It's a transportation license. So there are about, I'll say Ag has guesstimated that there's going to be about 150 transport licenses granted, but they don't know for certain because there's not a limit on the number of licenses that they can have. Financial and Professional Regs oversees the dispensaries. There's currently 55 medical/adult use dispensaries. A few of those dispensaries are still medical only. That's because the cities in which they're located have not granted them permission to do adult use sales. There is currently pending legislation that will allow a dispensary, a medical dispensary that is not allowed by the city to do adult use, that it would allow them to relocate. So if any of you guys are located in a city that does not allow adult use dispensaries, but you got a medical dispensary, be aware that if this legislation passes, that you will most likely lose your dispensary. I don't know how you feel about that. There are also currently about 39 adult use dispensaries out there. So every medical dispensary that had a license was allowed to get what's called a second site license. So they get to have an additional adult use dispensary, adult use only dispensary. So every medical can have medical and adult, and then they're all going to have adult use dispensaries also. So by the end of this month, we should have 110 dispensaries totaled. The reason I say the end of this month is because they have to be licensed by the end of March of 2021, or they lose the ability to have that second site license, it can be reawarded. Financial Professional Regs estimates that by June of this year, there will be about 190 total dispensaries throughout the state. The vast majority of them will be in the Chicagoland area, so congratulations. That being said, there's also pending legislation that will increase that number by about 75. So we could be well over 250 by the end of this year. So what does a Cannabis Control Office do? So our office itself, we conduct monthly inspections of all cannabis regulated entities. Right now, that's just that's just cultivation centers and dispensaries, but we will be conducting inspections of all of the new entities that are coming online. The main things that we assess for is security of the facility. We monitor the inventory for diversion and loss, and then we try to ensure that laws and rules are followed. We do not have regulatory powers, so we have to refer any of our reports to the regulating agency, which would be Ag or Financial and Professional Regs. So we're talking about the need for security, and I don't know how many of you guys have visited any of the dispensaries that are out there. Some of them are very good with their security, and some of them are not. People in the business as a whole, they tend to not take, I think, in my opinion, they don't take the need for security as high as what they should. So we're trying to work with them on being a little bit more proactive in security. So a price comparison, and the reason that we need security is if you look at the prices of gold, silver, and cannabis per gram, per eighth of an ounce, and then per ounce, you'll find that gold is obviously the most expensive, but cannabis doesn't fall terribly far behind it, and it falls way above the price of silver. So you wouldn't just leave a bar of silver sitting out unattended. And with the price of cannabis, these are the retail values on it, current as of yesterday. So they say that money doesn't grow on trees, but obviously it grows on bushes. Security concerns that we have, there's ever increasing number of attempted robberies, burglaries, scams, stuff like that is going on, and especially this spring and into the early summer. We had a lot of dispensaries, not just in Illinois, but throughout the country, that were suffering thefts and break-ins from the protests. There were several, I don't remember the exact number, but there were probably about at least 10 break-ins due to the civil unrest and protests in the Chicagoland area. And some of the dispensaries were completely annihilated and breached. Some of them were not. So during the protests, we were giving the dispensaries advice on how to secure their facilities better, to board up and things like that. Some of them listened, some of them did not. Other security concerns, I don't know if you guys remember, it's been a little bit over a year ago, Mocha, which is in Chicago, I believe Logan Park area, they got hit on basically the first weekend after adult use went legal, and they suffered a hit of about $200,000 that was taken from there. They've still not been able to determine who had done it. Just from the information that was released, I would say that there was somebody that had great inside knowledge of the facility. So, but they were able to get $200,000 out of that facility in the overnight, and they still have not been caught at this point. There's been an increase in gun violence around dispensaries. So I know that Detroit has had them. This one here's Portland. Denver has had a lot of armed action at their dispensaries, and people are using better and higher caliber guns to go in because they know that these are soft targets. Concerns that we have is most of the transactions are cash. So because the feds don't recognize cannabis and it's still illegal, it makes it more difficult for them to use debit cards, credit cards, checks, and the stuff like that. Illinois did pass a banking act that is supposed to help with that. The problem is most of the banks are federally insured, so it doesn't really help them a lot. They have started going to some in-house ATMs, and some of them are even offering their own credit cards. So that does decrease a little bit of the cash. And with the ATMs, the good thing about it is it limits the actual total amount of cash in the facility, or hypothetically it does, because they start recycling it. The other thing about it is all of the cannabis products are extremely valuable, as we looked at what the prices were, and then they're also highly portable. And it is not uncommon for dispensaries to take in several thousands of dollars in one day for cash, and then they've got several thousands of dollars of product. We actually, during the civil unrest, we had to assist one dispensary with an escort of their product out of the Chicagoland area, and they had over $4 million worth of product that they were transporting away from Chicago. There's somebody with looks like an AR pistol or something. So we're talking about money with these places. So if you start looking at the program as a whole and the financials for it, I took over the program in March of 2018, I believe. And in February of 2018, the retail sales were about $8.5 million for that month in the medical program. There were about 30,000 unique patients. And the difference between a unique patient and a qualifying patient is, qualifying is all the people that hold licenses. A unique patient is the actual number of patients that purchased that month. So in the month of February, though there were 33,000 qualifying patients, only about 30,000 of them spent the $8.5 million. If you fast forward to February of 21, we've gone up to almost $30 million in sales. The unique patients has about doubled, but if you look at the qualifying patients, there's a lot more people that have patient cards. So overall medical sales retail from when the program started selling, which was November of 2015 to now, they are right under $1 billion in retail sales. Current retail sales for 2020 were right over $3.5 million. And then you start looking at adult rec sales. In 2021, so in January and February, we've been over $80 million in sales, and it gives you a breakdown of in-state and out-of-state residents. And then also in 2020, they did over $669 million in sales. So, that's what they did just in adult rec sales. So add in the medical, and we were well over $1 billion in sales. Start looking at the money that it brings in. So the different taxes that they have on it. There's a wholesale tax, which is at the cultivation center, and that's on the front end of it. So the retail or the consumer doesn't actually see that. There's a 7% tax on that. And then the state sales tax, I believe, is still currently about 6.25%. Then for retail of adult use, they have it broken down into, if it's under 35% THC for the bud, then it's a 10%. If it's an infused product, it's 20%. And if it's above 35% THC in a flower product, then it's 25%. The industry standard for THC content in cannabis now is usually they try to aim for about 24% THC. I believe that the highest national amount of THC, which was generated in Illinois at one of our cultivation centers, was about 37, almost 38%. So the THC in the cannabis that is out there now is a lot higher than what it was back when I was in high school and college. So you got those different taxes, and then the city can put a tax in of about 3%, and then the county can also do about 3.75%. Now, that doesn't include a local sales tax that you might have also. So this is just an excise tax on cannabis alone. So the total taxes on cannabis can range about as high as 45% and about as low as 30%, depending upon the location. If you compare that to alcohol taxes in the Chicagoland area back in, I think this is 2016, and I can't get a firm number on this, but I've heard that it's quite a bit higher. But the amount of tax on a bottle of, say, vodka in Chicago was about 28%. I've heard that this is anywhere between 35 and 40% now. So you'll find that the taxes on alcohol are pretty comparable to the taxes on cannabis. The difference being is that with alcohol, all of the taxes on that, for the most part, are front end or hidden tax, so the consumer doesn't see it. With cannabis, they actually have on their bill the different taxes, and that generated a lot of complaints from the consumers. If you look at beer taxes, so this was as of January, so disregard some of the total taxes and everything, but just on beer taxes for the state of Illinois, you're looking at about a 22% tax just on beer. For taxes collected, I don't have it for the whole year of 2020, but as of September, there was over $100 million in taxes collected from adult use. The initial projection for 2020 was 50 million, so we exceeded that, doubled that. And then in September of 2020, we were actually able to rival the state's liquor tax, which is the highest producing sales tax or revenue tax that we have in the state. So both cannabis and alcohol are generating similar sales revenue. So some legal restrictions regarding cannabis, and we'll kind of go through this as you guys are all cops. We'll go through this quickly because I'm sure that you guys are familiar with it, or you know where to find it at least. But Illinois residents can have 30 grams of flour, 500 milligrams of infused products, and 5 grams of cannabis concentrates. Half of that is allowed for non-residents. And if you guys want, when you get the PowerPoint or whatever, you can go back and look. It breaks down the different sales for in and out of state, so you can see how much money we're bringing in from out of state residents. How much is 30 grams? It's about a big heaping 2 handfuls. Home grows are now allowed. They became allowed as of January of last year. So it's only for medical card holders. So if the person does not have a medical card, then they cannot have a home grow. They're also limited to, they cannot have more than 5 plants that are over 5 inches tall. If they're under 5 inches tall, they can have an unlimited number of plants, but once they get to 5 inches tall, then they have to have it culled down to 5 plants. The person must be 21 or older. They must have lived in Illinois for 30 days. There's other restrictions for where they can grow, who can have access to it, and everything. May possess or use cannabis. So of interest, it talks about private location. So it says any private location unless otherwise prohibited under the Smoke-Free Illinois Act. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but basically it's saying that if you're in a private location, you may possess or use cannabis. And there's going to be a caveat to that. It also allows that a retail tobacco store, so a cigar shop or a hookah lounge or something like that, could apply for from the local government to be a cannabis consumption area. The problem, I don't know how viable that would be unless they are also a dispensary or a craft grow, because what would the monetary incentive be for a cigar shop to allow you to start smoking cannabis in there unless you can, rent the space or something? I don't know what you're going to buy from a cigar shop if you're bringing your own cannabis in. The dispensing organization is also able to have an on-site consumption place, so they can have a smoke shop at a dispensary. There are a couple that have been planned in the Chicagoland area and a couple that I know of in the Springfield area. They have not come to fruition yet. Nobody has wanted to be the first one to try to do that. So that has not happened, but it is a possibility. Can't possess them in these areas. You can possess them in a vehicle under these conditions, and we'll come back to a little bit of that later. Can't use cannabis in a motor vehicle, places like that. Employers are still able to have zero tolerance or a drug-free workplace policy. There's some legislation that is pending that is probably going to pass and change this. It will limit the employer's rights of who they can restrict from using it. So employers are gonna have to implement some different policies. Reason I was talking about a public place. So when you start talking about public places, it includes, but is not limited to, all of these places. There are several of these that you might think is a private place, like private clubs. So you got your Rotary Club or your Lions or your firefighters or something like that. If they've got a private club, that's still considered a public place. It also includes bars, taverns, skating rinks, reception areas, all that type of stuff. So things that you might think are public because they're open to the public don't qualify under this. And then the other thing that you have to look at is and this public place is defined under the Smoke-Free Illinois Act. So if you start getting under that, that's where you find all of these restrictions at, because if you remember before, it says as long as it's not limited by the Smoke-Free Illinois Act. Currently, there's one cultivation center in DuPage County. It's almost right on the county line. It's Curative Health. It's in Aurora. The CRTA, or the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis, allows for inspections by IST or the Department of Agriculture. There is a caveat that if they produce food products, which they do, that they can be subject to public health inspections. So that is one way that you guys can regulate, or that you can make sure that they're keeping up to standards and everything. That being said, though, Curative Health is not able to be inspected by local law enforcement. Usually we have to get permission, but we would be more than happy if anybody would like to reach out to us to conduct some tours of the facility. I think that it's especially beneficial for law enforcement command, or if you guys have tactical officers, SWAT officers that might have to go into the facility if there's a law enforcement response needed, active shooter or something like that. We also offer this to the fire departments because there are a variety of chemicals that are contained at these places. So if anybody would like to have a tour of Curative Health, please reach out to us and we'll provide our information at the end of this. Currently, these are the dispensaries that are in DuPage County. Some of them have not opened up yet. I believe in the month of March that we have 5 or 6 of these that 4 or 6 of these that we're inspecting. A couple of them we've already done. I believe Lombard was just happened or is getting ready to happen. But these are all different dispensaries that are going to be in DuPage County, and I apologize if I may have missed one that's in the area. Okay, good to know. Oak Brook Terrace, we'll change that. I don't know if you're happy about that or not, but thank you. Dispensary rules. So the dispensary does have a variety of rules that they must go by. So they can only get their product from Illinois cultivation centers, craft growers, or infusers. They cannot grow their own cannabis. Now, there's a caveat to that. If they have a craft grow license, that's being produced under a different license. They cannot sell consumable alcohol, so you can't sell alcohol to go with this, other than if it's in a tincture. There's limitations on that. They also can't have drive-through windows and such. Can't have vending machines. It says no delivery services to residences. There are about 3 or 4 bills that have been introduced that will allow dispensaries to deliver, or third parties to do deliveries. Some of them are requiring licensing, some of them are not. I don't know what's going to happen with those, but due to the number of them that have been introduced, I would not be surprised if we start seeing delivery service being allowed. But presently, there are no delivery services, and we get a lot of complaints, or the dispensaries get a lot of complaints, because there are scams out there saying that they're affiliated with the dispensary, and they purchase something online, and then either they don't get it or they do get it, but it's not the product that they believe that they paid for. They also dispensaries must have video surveillance equipment and point of sale inventory control and BioTrack. We'll talk a little bit about BioTrack later. One of the things to remember here is all of the dispensaries have video surveillance inside and out of their building. Some of it's better than others. But if you guys have a crime that is committed in the area or something like that, these can be a good resource because a lot of their cameras are better than what you get on security video from other places. So dispensaries cannot sell live plant material, and they can sell seeds for medical card holders of interest. So I had already said that medical card holders can grow their own plants. They are supposed to get their plants or their seeds from dispensaries. The problem with that is no cultivation center at this point has made its seed available to dispensaries to sell. That being said, there's nothing in the law that allows us to penalize somebody or make them show us where they actually received their seed from. So there's a lot of third-party illicit transactions going on for seed sales out there, and pretty much any plant that you would find in somebody's house is going to be from an illegal source, because none of the cannabis seeds that are available, or I'm sorry, there are no cannabis seeds available, but being able to prove that is going to be virtually impossible. They also have to have licensed contractor to provide private security during all hours of the dispensary's operation. So they have to be licensed. It's going to be a third-party contractor. They also have to use an electronic reader or scanning device to scan the purchaser's government identification to ascertain the validity of the identification and the age of the purchaser. We'll get into this a little bit later, but unless it's a medical patient, the dispensary cannot keep the purchaser's information, so it has to be purged by the end of the day. So it would be difficult or it's impossible to say by scanning it, oh, well, this person purchased this, unless they're a medical patient. Or the other thing is, if a customer willingly waives their anonymity to this by signing up for loyalty rewards program, then the dispensary may keep that information. They not necessarily will they share it with law enforcement, but it would be something that should be able to be subpoenaed. If you find that you have a medical patient that you have questions about, we can actually track medical sales if they buy it under the medical program and not the adult use program. If they buy it, we can track it down by lot numbers of where it went and possibly, who bought it, when they bought it, that type of stuff. If that could help with one of your investigations, that's something that you'd want to reach out to the Cannabis Control Office for. So pending growth under the current law. So in addition to the 55 current medical, the 55 second site adult use, and the 75 Bureau of Labor Statistics licenses that were supposed to come available last year but haven't. So we're still going to have 75 of those this year. There's an additional, and I say 100 here, but I just looked at the law again. It's actually an additional 110 dispensaries that could be added by December of this year. Then we've also got the 20 craft grows, 20 infusers that were supposed to have been awarded licenses last year, but they were not. So those are coming this year. And then once again, unlimited transport. So that's all that's under the current legislation, under the current Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. So there's pending legislation to do an additional 75 BLS, or Bureau of Labor Statistics, which puts about 40 or 45 of them in the Chicagoland area. So in addition to all of the other places that are going to be, there's pending legislation that's going to allow for 75 additional licenses. So they would be available. And actually, that's a second type, but it would just be adult use. And the reason for that is because the awarding process for the current licenses for dispensaries was a little mucked up, and they have several lawsuits on it. They're also trying to increase craft grow square footage. So initially, craft grows only had to be 5,000 square feet, or that they started out a maximum of 5,000 square feet of canopy space. Once again, imagine a Walmart, a Kmart, abandoned building that could be converted into a craft grow. They are now saying that the initial size of a craft grow, if this legislation passes, is going to be 14,000 feet. And then I believe it can increase by 14,000 square feet increments by request. And then also I said there's a variety of home delivery options, which can create some headache for law enforcement. Who can perform dispensary inspections? So I don't know if you guys are wanting to start going out and looking at and performing dispensary inspections or not. That would be completely within your right. Under the medical program, it's not allowed. So there's a few, I believe 5 or 6 medical only dispensaries. It would not be allowed under that, but under the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, it allows local law enforcement to go in and perform an unannounced dispensary inspection. So for the ISP, our dispensary inspections are based upon a review of the requirements provided under the medical use law, adult use law, and also the JCAR rules that IDFPR has. Most of the JCAR rules that applied under medical were added into the adult use law. So pretty much a review of that is what we go through to see what the different administrative rules or violations can be. If you guys are wanting to start your own dispensary inspections, we can provide you with our forms and everything, but you might want to have your legal department or whomever determine what rules you want to inspect on and not. So this is just a copy of one of our adult use dispensary forms. Some of the things that we do have access to, so we can actually remote into, or we should be able to remote into all of the dispensaries to their surveillance cameras. Unfortunately, law enforcement or non-ISP will not have access to these surveillance cameras remotely. Now, that doesn't mean that you couldn't go on site and ask them the different questions about their cameras. So also, local law enforcement would not have access to BioTrack. So BioTrack is the seed to sale system that the Department of Agriculture purchased and is used by all all cannabis industry, licensed cannabis industry in the state of Illinois. And it's a seed to sale program. So we can go back and track. So if you have an end product of, say, some gummies, the BioTrack number that's on there, we can enter it into our system and we can track it back through its various stages of processing and of possession. So we can tell you what cultivation center it came from. We can tell you if it was mixed with product from another cultivation center and things like that. And we can actually take it back to what would have been the mother plant for it. This allows us to track the product all the way through for inventory and purposes like that. But it also, with medical patients, it keeps in here the BioTrack information, so we could track back product that a medical patient has purchased, but it would only break it down to the lot number. So if there were 100 gummies that were produced, packages of gummies that were produced, and only 5 of them were sent to the dispensary that you are looking at, and your medical person purchased all 5 of those, then it would be a safe assumption that they came from that dispensary and stuff. So we can track it that way for purposes of an investigation if needed. This record keeping, this is another part of our dispensary inspection. So I mentioned it earlier, so ISP does not have regulatory power over the dispensary. So any of our inspections that we do, whether it's medical, whether it's adult use, or other inspections that we do not have the ability to fine or institute a change for that violation. So we have to refer all of our inspection violations to IDFPR, and then IDFPR reviews it and decides what, if any, action they'll take. Sometimes, depending upon the severity of it or how often it happens, will be, what action they may take on it. So local government does have some restrictions. So if you guys are looking at doing your own inspections and everything, I would encourage you to have your legal counsel review 410 ILCS 705/55 for the general provisions, but especially under the 55/25 for local ordinances. So it gives you some things that you can restrict or control, and then it gives you some things that you can't. So it does say the local ordinances that you can establish civil penalties for violations of an ordinance governing time, place, manner of operation, and stuff like that. But it also states that you can't give a penalty or a violation or make rules that go against the act. So you can the only city or local ordinances that you could enact would be based upon the first items that I talked about, the sale, the times that they're open and everything like that. So what can we do to help keep our communities safe? So for the most part, dispensaries want to build a relationship with the community in which they reside and work. So they oftentimes will try to establish a good relationship and rapport with the city and the entities there. So what do? They can bring jobs to the community. They can bring increased tax revenue. They can bring increased support for local businesses and everything. So those are some good things that they can do. Downsides that we've seen throughout the state, there's a potential for increased theft and robbery. So this can occur inside the dispensary, whether it's during looting, whether it's an actual robbery, whether it's employee diversion, shoplifting, what have you. But another trend that we were seeing, especially down in the Collinsville area, was snatch and runs. And then up in the Chicagoland, they were having mugging. They were waiting for watching people. If a place didn't have an ATM inside the facility, there was usually an ATM nearby. And since people had to use cash, they would be waiting. The bad guy would be waiting near the ATM that was nearest the dispensary, and then they'd mug the person for their cash as they were going up to dispensary. Or down in Collinsville, what they were doing is they would wait until people, the parking area for the dispensary down at Collinsville was a couple blocks away. So people would have to walk back to their vehicle. And when that was done, you'd have a car drive up and just do a real snatch and run or snatch and drive, I guess. So that's one of the downsides that we can see throughout the state. There's a big potential for increased traffic congestion. There's a lot of traffic that comes through these places, whether it's vehicular traffic or foot traffic. but you're going to have a large influx, especially if you're near a state border, which I mean, you guys aren't that far from Wisconsin or Indiana. So keep that in mind. You'll be getting a lot of traffic coming through. One of the things that we've seen, depending upon the area, but there's been a lot of places that have seen an increase in panhandling and congregating of homeless persons. And then one of the things to keep in mind, that keeping the dispensaries out of your towns or communities does not keep cannabis out of your town or community. So one of the towns here in Central Illinois, Decatur, did not want a dispensary in its location, and I don't know if they're going to get one nearby, but the surrounding communities said, no, we'd be more than happy to take it. And so dispensaries are looking at the other locations. And it's not going to keep cannabis out of your community or out of your town. What it does is it keeps the revenue out of it. And you guys have seen the sales and everything. So if this current pandemic that we're in is showing anything, it's shown that the cannabis industry is pretty much pandemic proof. And I don't know, I've had, like I said, 25 years of law enforcement experience. The whole cannabis thing was eye-opening and new to me. It took a lot of difference in what we do for law enforcement. So we had to change our perspective in the way that we deal with cannabis, but I don't see it going away. I see it coming at a federal level soon. And, there's only 6 states that it's not legal in. So I would say it's not going to go away. Keeping it out of your towns doesn't make it go away. Things we can do to mitigate problems. First of all, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is we want to make sure that we keep a good rapport with the industry, in this case, the dispensaries, keep them apprised of threats. When we were having the different looting and civil unrest earlier last year, we were in constant contact with the dispensaries and the cultivation centers, updating them of planned protests in the area and things like that, because once again, a lot of the dispensaries were very soft, target-rich environments. So we keep them apprised of potential civil unrest, increased criminal trends that we see, and then if we point out any security concerns that we have for them. Something else that we can do to mitigate the problems is increasing the training for DUIs and drug recognition experts, performing illicit cannabis interdictions, so getting the trafficking off, because that reduces the amount of taxes that are being paid, of course, and then though a small amount of it comes to law enforcement, it would lower the bit that we do get for training. Something that we've noticed, especially when there's problems going on or when they're first opening, but dispensaries a lot of times are open to hiring back off-duty police officers to supplement their required third-party security. And you'll find this a lot of times, that they will offer hire back or something, bringing the police officers. I believe it was Romeoville. I could be wrong, but I was up at one of the dispensaries up there, and I'll say an older lady, but she had a mask on. I don't know how old she was, but she made the comment to the officer who was doing traffic control and everything, and everything. She's like, I've never had a police officer help me buy my cannabis before. So it was able to put a different turn or perspective on what the role of police is with the new laws. Things that you can also do is do increased patrols and officer presence in the area. Once again, these are live targets. Work with your state's attorney. I don't know what DuPage County is. I think that one of my sergeants had talked to one of the drug task force guys. I think Andy's on here, and he said that DuPage County is looking at it by a case-by-case perspective. But, make sure that you try to work with them and define what they want to have in order to do criminal charges if they're going to do any cannabis criminal charges. Other things that you can do, one of the things that we do is we conduct underage cannabis dispensary details. These are similar to the alcohol details or cigarette details that I know that some of you guys do. And basically what we do is we send out, hours we're able to provide overtime for. I don't know if you guys would or not, but we're able to work with the state's attorneys to determine what possible charges are beforehand. Keep in mind that if you do a single pre-roll joint or something like that, that's going to be the cheapest that you could get a sale for, and that's probably going to be a misdemeanor buy. You could turn it into a felony buy if you did like a THC infused edible, just even one of the single chocolates, usually under the Cannabis Control Act, falls under a felony, given its total weight. The question that you have to ask yourself there is, do you want to initially bring felony charges? Yeah, so Andy just said that I'm correct for once. So, do you initially want to bring felony charges for what in another industry, like say, alcohol would be a business or a misdemeanor offense? Now that being said, if you have repeat offenders and everything, then, obviously you might want to try to step up your game and get a better charge against them. We've conducted last year, I believe, about 90 underage dispensary checks, and we had about, I think it was 5 cells to underage, and I don't believe any of those resulted in criminal charges. The state's attorney's offices of the different places all declined on them. So what we did was we referred it to the Department of Financial and Professional Regs so that they could go administrative. Unfortunately, with that, the process that FPR has for their fining and administrative rules is a slow process. So even the sale that we got back in February of last year is still in the penalty phase and going through their court hearing. So it will be a rather drawn out process, but hopefully they will get a decent penalty in the end. So this is our cannabis dispensary operation plan, and then a copy of one of our detail forms. It's a basic form that we use. It's got Andy's name on it there. But we can provide you guys with copies of these if you want them also. It'll give you a go-by or a starting point if you want to conduct these details. We found, especially a couple of the dispensaries that have been done multiple sales to minors, they're starting to take a look at it. So like Cresco, which owns Sunnyside, has had a few sales, and they're being proactive now, and they're trying to conduct their own security checks. So we've been working with them, showing them proper ways to check IDs, even though they have the scanner, and just giving them best practices of what they need to do. It's really simple, and when you do one of these details, request if you get an underage buy, request copies of all the video of the sale, because they can provide it to you because it's a criminal investigation, or they're required to cooperate for a criminal investigation. If you have any problems, reach out to us and we'll help you get it. But on pretty much all, I think actually all of the underage sales, you can see the video shows that they scan the ID, and then it pops up on the screen, a big red X, or under 21 or something like that, and the person just isn't paying attention, and they just hustle them through. But I mean, that's great for us in showing, hey, look, you scanned it, it says that they're under 21. But working with the dispensaries to help them properly check IDs, and then also some of them are conducting unauthorized access checks. It's something that we do also, which means just following somebody in, or more commonly what we do, because they have to check the ID. They have to know that the person is allowed to be in there because it's a limited access area once you get inside the sales floor. So a lot of times what we'll do is we will have one of our inspectors or somebody wait until somebody's coming out the door, the exit door, and then he'll walk in right behind them. He'll walk in the outdoor. And then we just document that and refer it to FPR also. So things that you can do is work with dispensaries on. So these are things that the industry itself hasn't really thought of that much. They're thinking of it a little bit more because we keep harping on it with them, but most of them don't think of it. How do they want to respond if they have looting or civil unrest in the area? How do they respond to a robbery or armed takeover? Especially, how do they respond to a weather emergency? We asked one of the dispensaries one time, because the safest place generally in a dispensary is within its cannabis vault. But is that really where you want to take, the 20 customers that are in your establishment, during a weather emergency? So, I mean, they need to think about these and how they're going to respond. And then you might want to talk to them how law enforcement is likely to respond to whether, a robbery or something like that, or if it's during civil unrest and everything. I mean, we were getting calls to us, hey, we're getting looted, we're getting that. And law enforcement overall was pretty much overwhelmed, so we couldn't respond to them. So, we let the dispensaries know, hey, this is going on. Our advice is not to be open today because you cannot get proper protection. Medical cannabis still exists. So just because the Adult Use Act went into effect, medical cannabis is still there. So it still goes on. Those people that have that have medical cannabis cards can actually have higher possession limits. So normally it's 30 grams that you can have of flower, but a medical cannabis patient, the minimum of flower that they can have is 2.5 ounces. The largest, and that's in a 2-week, so that's the purchasing that they can do within a 2-week period, but they can possess 2.5 ounces at any time for their own home and or personal medicinal use. The largest number that I've seen is on somebody's medical card is 14 ounces. I've heard that there was a 17-ounce limit, but 14 ounces in 2 weeks. That's a serious medical problem. Medical cannabis also can allow patients under the age of 21. So adult use is limited to over 21 or 21 and over. Medical cannabis can be under the age of 21. So just because somebody has cannabis on them and they're underage doesn't necessarily mean that it's illegal. So how do you verify a medical card holder? So this is a copy of a medical card, and it gives the information and everything that they have on it. In order for a person to claim an exemption under medical, hey, this is my medical, that's why I'm able to have 14 ounces, or hey, I've got 5 plants in my house and on a medical card. They actually have to have their card available so that you can see it. So if they're possessing more and they don't have their card, technically that's a violation, so they're not protected by the Medical Act. I would probably want to try to verify or, possibly treat it like a insurance ticket or something like that, or verify with the state's attorney as to whether you want to charge them or not, or if they even would consider charges. There's also, so as of about a year and a half ago, I think it was, medical card holder information used to be available from SOS Leads on 1027. So we would, much like it would have a concealed carry, it would say, this is a medical card or medical patient. And that was removed because the legislature had felt that, or they thought that medical patients were being targeted for cannabis possession. I don't know. I was never able to get a reasoning or example behind that, but So they passed a law stating that the medical card holder information could not be available on 10/27. An officer can run a check through the Department of Public Health's website, which is listed here, and we can make it available to you. But the problems with it is it only works if you have the medical card or the person knows their card number, which most of them probably would not. There's other problems, but we'll go into that. So the way that you use it is you'd go to this website, and then you would hit the verify or registry identification card. You then go there and click there, and then you would enter the card number. And the problem is you enter the number, and all it tells you back is it's a registered patient or a caregiver or something like that. It gives you their registration number, and it'll show whether it's valid or not. So it doesn't tell you that it's Bob Smith. So you've got no way to ensure that this card number is attached to that person unless you actually have their card in front of you. And there's no way to search by person's name or date of birth or anything. It's only by the card number. That being said, back to BioTrack. So BioTrack, I talked about, was a seed to sale, but it also tracks all of the medical card holders. So right now, we're in the process of getting STIC access to BioTrack. So they will have the ability to look up medical card holders from a variety of identifiers. So easiest would be by name and date of birth. If it's a very uncommon name, we can search statewide. We can narrow it down to cities. We can do all kinds of different search factors that we can look things up. And we're getting more and more inquiries from not just ISP, but local law enforcement and everything. The state's attorneys are wanting to verify that before they charge somebody that this person is not a medical card holder. So we're having to do lookups with that, which is why we're getting this pawned off to STIC, because we don't have the time to do all of it. But if right now, before STIC gets up and running with this, if you need to have it, you can email us at this email address, and we'll be able to check it. It's not instantaneous. There's only a few of us that have access to it. This is our phone number, but it's not 24 hours, so we don't have the ability to do it in real time all the time. STIC will. STIC also has access to a GIS cannabis map. So this map is available to all of STIC and all of ISP. And what it shows on it is it shows all the hemp growers, hemp processors, all of the cultivation centers and dispensaries. It will show the craft growers and infusers, and it'll show it at different levels for all of these. We are talking about trying to make it available to other law enforcement. It's just a matter of security because of the platform that it's on. So we're not exactly certain how we're going to be able to put that out there. But at a minimum, if you guys contact anybody from ISP, they may not know it, but they have access to this GIS map. And then also STIC has access. So if you guys get a complaint of a weed farm or a cannabis farm in your jurisdiction, and you want to make sure that it's not a hemp grow, then we should be able to track it down. The same for hemp processors and stuff like that. Dispensaries are going to be well marked. Cultivation centers, by law, they can't. We're not supposed to give out their address. Most places, they've been in business long enough that everybody knows where they're at now. Like I said, dispensaries are well marked. Craft grows and infusers will probably fall under the same rules as cultivation centers, but those rules have not been written yet. So this is just a couple screen captures of from the GIS map, but it shows the different dispensaries that are available, and then it can also show the growers, the cultivation centers, and the hemp growers and processors in it. this is the section I like to call sticky wickets. So this is the problems that we have with the different cannabis laws in the state of Illinois. So first of all, there's the caveat. So right now, I do not know of any cases regarding problems with cannabis in the state of Illinois that have made it to the appellate court or the Supreme Court. So just keep in mind that it's a fluid process, and you probably don't want to get your name on one of the first court cases, especially if you're not 100% certain on what you did. That being said, so here's where we run into some different problems. So this is IVC, and it talks about possession of adult use cannabis in a motor vehicle. So it gives you descriptions here. So it says that you can't possess it, but it gives sealed, odor-proof, and then a cannabis container. And the reason that those cause problems, in regards to container, it says sealed. Does that mean, is it resealable container? There's legislation, a couple different pieces of legislation that's going to change that to sealed or resealable. I believe that those will pass, but I don't know that. But what does it mean by sealed? Is it something that's resealable? Does it have to have a tamper evidence seal? Can it have never been opened? We don't know. So that's a gray area where they haven't defined it for us. What does odor-proof mean? Does that mean that you can't smell it? That you as the officer can't smell the cannabis odor emanating from the container? Or does that mean a canine? And speaking to canine officers, that's not possible. The biggest problem that I have with this, and anybody that has inspected or even worked in a cultivation center or something like that, is you get residual odor on the different containers, their plastic, the paper, things like that, that's going to smell like cannabis. We go in and do inspections of cultivation centers, and the little OtterBox containers on our iPhones smell like cannabis for a couple days. So I guess I need to check my people a little bit more closely, but to my knowledge, none of us have cannabis on us, but we smell like we have cannabis. So, what about residual odor? And then you got the other thing, what if it's hemp? Hemp smells exactly the same. So how do you know that it's, marijuana, or is it hemp? Those are problems, sticky wickets. The Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act defines, and I think this kind of helps us, but it has not gone through any court reviews. It defines cannabis container means a sealed, traceable container or package, blah, 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 blah. So what that's saying is traceable. They use the term right back here. They use cannabis container in IVC, and since there's no other definition for cannabis container, our legal has determined, and this is just our legal, has said that the only definition of cannabis container is actually found under the CRTA. So that means traceable. The only way that I can think of, and this is just me and the other people in the Cannabis Control Office, the only way that we can think of that it's going to be traceable is if it's in the original dispensary container containing the BioTrack label. So that, that could be something that you could use for law enforcement purposes, because in that vehicle, though the intent of the law may have been that they can just put it in a sealed container, or you can buy containers on Amazon that are supposed to be odor proof and everything, but it's not going to be traceable. All of the pending legislation that we've seen that we've reviewed for this year so far has kept traceable in there. So, that's something I would prefer. All cannabis, at least in a vehicle or something like that, has to be in its original dispensary container, but that's just my own personal opinion. So when it talks about reasonably inaccessible, so here it's talking about traceable and everything. It further defines in the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, it says that it has to be reasonably inaccessible when in a vehicle, but it doesn't give a penalty if it's not. There's no penalty in the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act if you don't have it reasonably accessible. As we saw previously in the IVC definition, it doesn't mention reasonably inaccessible. So there's different laws out there that are in confliction with each other. There are some proposed legislation, once again, to clarify that. There's another part in the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act that says any product containing cannabis shall be packaged in, I believe it goes on to say, a cannabis container or whatever, but there are some law enforcement agencies and groups out there that are stating that all cannabis, even if it's kept on your person, has to be kept be packaged in a cannabis container. The part of the law is actually referring to labeling and selling at a dispensary, but it's creating ambiguity or things that we don't know. So it's another sticky wicket, as I like to call it. This is another bane of our existence. It's popping up all over the place. There's a whole bunch of head shops and places that are starting to sell Delta 8 cannabis, usually under the labeling of hemp. So we've been getting lots of referrals regarding Delta 8. So basically, Delta 8, it's Delta 8 THC, which is very, very similar to Delta 9 THC. It is found in very small concentrations in hemp naturally, but in order to usually produce it in any quantity, it has to be converted from CBD, so they have to do a synthetic process to convert it. Delta 8 will get you high. It does have psychoactive effects. The question is it legal or not? So under the Illinois Cannabis Control Act, it talks about all cannabinoids. Delta 8 would be a cannabinoid. Under the federal farm bill, it talks about hemp and hemp being legal. Well, the DEA at the end of last year basically did a final rule saying that because it's synthetically processed, that it's still a Schedule I controlled substance. Now, this is just the DEA's final rule on it, and of course that means that some people believe that Delta 8 is illegal. Some people believe that it is. There's currently pending currently pending case in federal or several pending cases regarding the legality of Delta 8. So if you guys start seeing this popping up in your local area, you're going to have to work with your state's attorney and see if they are willing to charge Delta 8. Right now, our best guess, and it keeps changing daily, we've had to do a lot of bill reviews lately. There are currently about 100 pending legislative bills right now regarding cannabis. So obviously, this is a very, very active and fluid topic. It's changing daily, and we don't know. There are several of them that contradict each other. There are several of them that are similar to each other, but just slightly different. So there's going to be a lot of changes coming, and just hold on, people. So basically, a recap real quick of what ISP does. So ISP's role as a whole is we do backgrounds. So the B of I there in Joliet does backgrounds on all the employees of the cannabis industry. They used to do backgrounds on medical patients, but that was ended by legislation. So medical patients no longer have to have background checks. ISP, the Cannabis Control Office, all of the cultivation and Department of Ag entities have to have security plans that were reviewed and approved by ISP. So we still do that. We do continuing security and regulatory inspections of all cannabis industries. So both the stuff covered by FPR and Ag. So ISP is the only agency that actually oversees or sees the whole program. So our inspectors go out and we conduct at least a monthly inspection of every cannabis entity. Ag only oversees the growth side of it, and FPR only oversees the dispensary and selling part of it. So we are the only agency that actually has the full view of what's going on, but we don't have regulatory powers. So we have to refer our stuff to the regulating entity. And then we also do criminal diversion investigations, which generally we farm out to the MEGS task forces and the zones for the investigations, and we can assist in support role because we don't have the personnel to do the criminal diversion investigations. That being said, that concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, you can start typing them in, or if you don't have any questions, I guess that ends it.
Thank you so much, John, for that informative presentation. We'll give it a minute for them to type questions if they have any. I do want to point out that there is the contact that has been included in the chat for the Cannabis Control Office. So if you want to jot that down. My one question I have is, who's overseeing and enforcing the marketing of these dispensaries? I know there's been a few big billboards on some of our main highways. I don't know if any are in DuPage, but right outside DuPage. And I don't know who's in charge or who to submit complaints to about those. I don't know if they are in line with the strict, state law, but I know there are some restrictions about marketing and those billboards that we are starting to see pop up.
So it depends upon if it's a cultivation center marketing like Cresco or GPI, something like that. Then it would go to ag. If it falls under a dispensary, then it would go to FPR. I can send you so I actually cut out some of the slides on this regarding advertising restrictions and everything. And of course, there's pending some new changes in legislation on it, but I can send you information on it. And if you have any questions about it, you can. So once again, ISP is not the regulating agency, but if you would send us like a picture or something like that, we would be more than happy to look into it. Typically, you can't have stuff that is marketed towards kids. You can't have items that are marketed or that show an actual depiction of a cannabis leaf or anything like that. But that being said, they're very open interpretation of what they consider marketing and everything. It comes down to the regulating agency and their interpretation. I would think that a billboard, depending upon what it contains, that would be considered marketing, but it would have to be done a case by case basis. Now, that being said, yes, Alex, I'll come to that in just a second. That being said, regarding the marketing is we can the only places that are regulated are cultivation centers, dispensaries, craft grows, infusers, that type of stuff. You've got a lot of third-party entities that are out there marketing and soliciting and everything that aren't regulated by the cannabis industry that we have, or the licensure part of the industry. So you've got doctors or groups that are marketing. I've seen seeds for sale. I've seen, plants. There's been all kinds of stuff. So those are not regulated. So if I wanted to sell, cannabis leaf T-shirts and I put a big billboard on it, if I'm not a cultivation center or a dispensary, then that's 100% legal. So it depends upon who actually has it. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Alex Martino asked what local PDs are allowed to do when it comes to dispensary inspections. So you can contact us and we can give you our forms that we have in regards to what we actually look at. Some of it you would not have access to, like BioTrack or being able to remotely access the cameras and everything. Everything else, I would think that you would be able to conduct an inspection on, and you're allowed to inspect. Now, if local jurisdictions try to implement local ordinances or something like that, for a while, Chicago was wanting to basically enact all of the dispensary J-car rules as local ordinances so that they could start fining and penalizing dispensaries for violations of local ordinances, which wouldn't then go under any of the state jurisdiction. There's the part of the law that restricts that from happening. But Alex, if you reach out to us, we can give you copies of our forms and everything, and then we'd be able to provide you with that information. And then also there's a section that talks about what you guys are allowed to do, making ordinances for like distances between places and times and sales and stuff like that. Samantha says, okay, so she's talking about, I wonder who that officer is, because technically, I would be curious as to what they do for informally inspecting the locations and stuff like that. But regardless, so Illinois is higher in prices than other states. And so you will find that Illinois is higher. There's a lot more taxes on it. Prices have come down as we are getting, I say we, but as the state of Illinois or the cultivation centers are getting more product to market. So the price has come down some. I can tell you that I've talked to some of our drug guys and our task force guys and stuff like that, and they've literally seen text messages from drug dealers in investigations that they've been conducting, that the drug dealer is happy that the price of cannabis in Illinois is high, and they are actually able to raise the price of the cannabis that they are selling because it's still lower than what you would be paying at a dispensary. So you do have the problem of illicit cannabis on the market. Oddly enough, and I mean, you can see by the sales that a lot of people are still buying it legally. So that's good. So yes, we are seeing an increase in sales and sales prices. And then somebody else asked, what's the best way to enforce sealed containers in vehicle stops? Glad you asked that, because I have a canned answer for that. That would be up to your department and your state's attorney's interpretation of the law. How do you know if it's an original container? So we can provide, if you reach out to us, we can provide you with depictions of what the cannabis containers look like, but they've all got to contain a BioTrack label on it, or labeling that says the cultivation center, the amount of THC, testing that's been done on it, and everything like that. And it also would have a dispensary name on it. So it's gonna have labeling like that. It'll have a BioTrack barcode on it. I do not know who Jermaine Galloway is. I've seen. Okay, so he is not from Illinois. So I've heard of Stop, and yes, so he's a retired officer from Texas. So yes, Illinois is seeing an increase of cannabis trafficking coming through the state. There is an overabundance of diverted cannabis in the Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and California markets that is making its way into and through Illinois. And so Illinois is a prime area for trafficking because of all the interstates. You guys have I-80 up there, but all the interstates mixing through here. So ISP does a lot of interdiction, and we get a lot of stops. And I know that some of you guys are out there doing it also. But we are seeing an increase of trafficking. We don't always know if it's destined for Illinois or if it's just passing through Illinois. But the cannabis being trafficked is generally what I would consider medical grade, so it's higher quality cannabis, and there's a lot of it coming through. Yes.
All right, if there's no other questions, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. They did provide their contact information, so you can always feel free to follow up with John and ISP afterwards if you have more direct questions. I do just want to, oh, and he just put his direct email up in the chat as well. Thanks, John.
It's a difficult email.
Okay. I just want to share my screen for one more second and promote another training we have coming up in April. So we do have an alcohol compliance training in April that we will be partnering with Prevention First on, and we will be providing the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standard Boards credits. So if you're in need of those, it's a longer training. It's from 9 to 3 p.m. on April 6th. And then those credits will be provided to anybody who attends. So I will send this event flyer out to everybody who registered today, and we will begin promoting this event as well. And that concludes today's training. So thanks again to Illinois State Police, to everybody who joined us today. We hope this was informative. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact John or ISP or myself if you're interested in learning more about our local coalition and what we're doing and how we can work together. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the nice weather. And hopefully we see you in April at our alcohol training.